This public hearing conducted by the Committee on Appropriation Adjudications will come to order. Notice the public hearing was disseminated to all local media outlets via electronic format on Wednesday, June 27th, with a second notice provided on June the 3rd, 2018. Notice the hearing was also made known on the legislature's website. Today we have one bill on the agenda. It's Bill number 1-9S, as introduced by the Committee on Rules by request of I Maga'láhen Guáhan, the Governor of Guam, in accordance with the Organic Act, an act to require the Guam Memorial Hospital to prioritize the revenues received from the general sales tax to correct the deficiencies identified in the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services and Joint Commission reports of 2018 by amending Section 3A use and amending 3A, the use and appropriation of revenue from Public Law 34-87. I will ask that everybody that testifies today testifies to the bill. Okay? The amendment is fairly simple. The amendment is to prioritize the use of the 0.75 to GMH to the Medicare and Medicaid, the CMS and JCO reports. Let's try to stay to that, just that point when we testify, all right? Why don't we start with Dr. Shimurokuru, Ken Leon Guerrero, and Sedfrey Linzagen. Oh. All right, why don't we do with Ken and then Sedfrey? Go ahead.
My name is Ken. Whoa. My name is Ken Leon Guerrero. I'm the spokesperson for Guam Citizens for Public Accountability. I'm here today to offer testimony on Bill 19S. I find it very interesting that the bill begins with highlighting that over the past 40 years, tens of millions of dollars have not been provided to Guam Memorial Hospital. And to my understanding, the current administration and governor have been in power for 8 of those years, and 2 years prior to that was the head of the Finance Committee, if I'm not mistaken. So the burden of this failure lies directly with the administration. And for the administration to submit this bill to dedicate a sales tax, a portion of it in a special fund, so to speak, that guarantees it will be spent on the hospital has no credibility whatsoever when during the term of this administration they have consistently raided every single special fund, diverted monies away from the original and intended purposes of those funds to be used to offset a large deficit of their own making. So this bill has no integrity to set up any type of a dedicated application. Now, moving on, I read the reports. The majority of the reports from the CMS address management issues, and nowhere in here does this bill address management issues. So on the basis of the section here where it says to address the deficiencies identified in the Centers of Medicare and Medicaid Services in the Joint Commission report, this bill does nothing to do that. Therefore, it should be killed just on that basis. So when we look at the fact that there's nothing in this bill that has any credibility as far as the public is concerned. Now, Guam Memorial is a very important part of the healthcare community, and the Guam Memorial Hospital needs to be adequately funded. We in the public agree with that, but what we don't agree with is the way that the hospital is being managed. And the fact that the CMS report was responded to without any activity on the board gives us no confidence in the ability of any board currently selected by this administration to adequately supervise the management team. Therefore, the management team has lost credibility with the public as well. Over the past 4 years, the cost of living has gone up in excess of 30%. Any increase in sales tax is going to drive it up to by over 40%. And we have not seen a corresponding increase in the wage structure. So therefore, not only does this bill fail on its premise, fail to have any credibility, there is no means of supporting a sales tax at this time that the public will agree to until such time as Guam Memorial Hospital has credible management in place that will instill a sense of confidence in the public. This management team, through their actions and inactions and the inactivity of the board, have destroyed any confidence that the public has in this management team to carry forward any type of remedy to the CMS. And I point out that we have got, 62 days before the certification is revoked by CMS, and still we have not seen anything in the way of credible action that we believe CMS would accept, that being a total replacement of the board, a total replacement of the management team with people that have a reputation and credibility as such that the CMS board would at least be willing to give an extension for the new team. So as far as we're concerned in the public, a bill to guarantee that a portion of any sales tax will be applied to purposes stated in this bill, we do not support this in any way, shape, or form.
Thank you very much. Mr. Linsagan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Good evening to all of you. My name is Sedfrey Linsangan. Regarding this issue, our main objective here is to fix the concerns of Center for Medicaid and Medicare Services. Even the sales tax was not repealed. It's still not enough if they need the budget to fix the other issue facing the Medicare and the accreditation program. It's only 2% will only bring 6 million a month, and then only 1% will be going to GMH, 0.75%, and 0.25% is going to the school. Therefore, only around $2 million will be going every month to Guam Memorial Hospital. That's my estimate, Mr. Speaker. Now, my point is, it is urgent that we need to fix this right away. The concerns of Medicare, not only the concerns of Medicare, but also the underpayment that they are paying GMH. Because just like what I said, per day they're only paying us $1,197, while the other hospital is 5,000 plus. It's almost 500% difference, $4,000. For 50 people in a day, that's 200,000. For 30 days, that's $6 million that we are being underpaid. So we need to file a protest. We need to file an appeal. But how could we convince them if we cannot address their concerns? And some areas needs money right away. And we cannot wait for other avenue. That's why what we need to do is whatever money that can be transferred right away to GMH. It's the governor's call and this body's call to act right away. Second, if you need to borrow money, it's worth it. We cannot afford to lose this Medicare. Because just like in business, you need to buy materials, you need to invest to make money. And the other issue, the other concern, the management issue, that's another area. and I believe that they can fix it. Especially there's ongoing investigation. There's another issue. The other issue is that needs funding. We need it right away, Mr. Speaker. Right away, not next 2 months or 3 months. And you need to do your part, and the governor to give this money right away to GMHs. Of course, it needs to be analyzed by your body. They need to identify the areas that needs money, and it needs to be scrutinized by this body. And then, in regards to the management issue, that's another issue. Just like I said, they could be prosecuted for malversation of funds, misconduct, and other corruption or other things if they're doing their job. Focus on whatever they need, and then let them fix it, but based on your scrutinization on how much they need, and regarding to their funding that they need, to their dedicated funding, how they need to identify how much do they need. Do we need to deal with them on a case-to-case basis? We cannot just say adequate funding, but it's not enough or it's more than enough. Sometimes in their situation, it depends on the revenue. That's why they need to really improve their billing services, especially to patients with private insurance. They need to collect it within 90 days, so it would help their cash flow. But then again, there's another issue. The main issue now is correct this deficiency. Whatever happened to the sales tax is not enough. And once you have this process going, I'm pretty sure CMS will approve, because we are acting in good faith. We are trying to process the funds that will fix the areas that needs to be fixed. And on the long term, we can make a claim against the federal government on the compact impact, because we're claiming almost $200 billion. But just like what they said, they have a requirement, in-house audit. And I believe it's justified that we need to be reimbursed more, but we just need to justify it. That's all, Mr. Speaker, and I hope you will work with the GMHs to settle this issue, because this issue is very important. Almost 70% of the revenue is coming from Medicare, Medicaid, and MIP, and you need to understand that GMH is not like GPA and GWA and other autonomous agency that when you cannot pay power, your power will be cut. Then they have to treat everybody regardless of their ability to pay. That's why it's important that we save GMH. It's very important, because not only it does provide care, health care, but also provide business to small business owners. Because if autonomous agency or GMH will be privatized, there will be a lot of small business that will be eliminated in the island. That's why it's important they remain as autonomous, or I mean to say government agency, because at least there is a procurement agency that is providing them business, because once it's privatized, that's it. They'll go direct to the mainland. They'll go direct to their favorite supplier, and a lot of business will be killed. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lunsagan. Any members of the panel have any questions of these two? Thank you very much. Ms. Peter John Camacho, Dr. Duenas, Benita Manglonia, Mr. Burns, Mr. Carlson, are you going to be testifying? Okay. Dr. Egan, were you testifying this morning? Between the four of you, I'll let you decide who goes, in what order you want to present.
Buenas noches, Señor Speaker and members of the committee. My name is Peter John Camacho, Administrator of the Guam Memorial Hospital Authority. I'm here to present testimony in support of Bill 19-S. This bill would provide a dedicated funding source to the hospital and would require that any findings from either the Joint Commission or Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services would be addressed first, and then for operational requirements, capital investments, or reserves. Senators, this sets the priority for the GMHA in the use of the funds in trying to address the results of an annual operating loss of about $30 million a year. Over the past 2 years, we've been sharing this message with members of our community. The op-ed letter by former Senator Alinya Machida in the PDN stated that it was critical to invest in GMH. In my understanding, investing was always a good thing. To invest is defined as to put money to use by purchase or expenditure in something offering potential profitable returns as interest, income, or appreciation in value. The second definition is to use, give, or devote time, talent, etc. as for a purpose to achieve something. Her 5 simple words have framed this journey very differently. To be sure, this was definitely a refreshing change in how someone described getting money to GMH. That version versus throwing good money after bad. What was sometimes more saddening is that generally, most people on Guam seem to agree that this institution that has served our island for decades really did need help. The little phrase that stated, something offering potential profitable returns, appreciation and value, triggered a simple thought. What if the investment in the GMH resulted in better patient outcomes? If our loved ones could receive the kind of care we all expect and had less or no complications and return to a productive life, or even if that wasn't possible, just the knowledge that everything humanly possible was provided in that care. The GMH is truly a great place to work, caring, compassionate, and skilled professionals at every level of the Team GMHA. It is an honor and privilege to work alongside with them, despite the many challenges and trials we face. Can we address those findings? Absolutely. There are many great minds working there. Dedicated? You bet your bottom dollar, and you can take that to the bank. What is needed is help to provide for the losses we encounter. Please help us. Put favor, ayudahan. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Duenas?
Good evening. My name is Vincent A. Duenas, Medical Director, Guam Memorial Hospital. Mr. Speaker, I'm going to make my words be few. It is my belief that policy changes is necessary to make the meaningful and lasting improvement in the health care of our people of Guam. It is my belief that our political leaders have a moral and civic responsibility for the public health care. It is my belief that a major component to improve the health care of our people involves Guam Memorial Hospital, our only public safety net hospital. We have been here before, many times, to convince and inform you that there is a serious health care problem facing our hospital that our political leaders need to address immediately. It is our opinion that GMH will need a dedicated funding source for the annual underpayment of the mandate given to GMH to provide health care to all who come to GMH doors without regard to the ability to pay for their health care. Without a dedicated funding source, GMH's ability to provide safe care and a safe environment to have better outcomes will be compromised. Mr. Speaker, this hospital, it belongs to you. This hospital wants to believe in you. We are desperate. We want to trust that you will provide us with the resources to provide safe, life-saving, and life-sustaining medical services to our people who are sick, who are suffering, and who are dying when they come to our doors. And with that said, sir, I'm going to turn it over to Benita. But again, I just wanted to kind of get the sense from the clinical side that we need help, and we're turning to you. There's no one else to turn to but you.
Buenas noches, Speaker and member na komite. My name is Benita Manglonian. I'm the Chief Financial Officer of Guam Memorial Hospital. When the sales tax bill was passed a couple months ago, we were very optimistic and we were very happy because we could finally start planning on how we can improve GMH and what are the priority items. But our hopes were dashed when the sales tax was repealed last week. That dedicated funding could have been a leverage for GMH. It could have done a lot of things. It would have addressed the decades of inadequate funding dating back to 1979. And please allow me. I shared this article before. It's 1979. It's a PDN article. It says creditors threaten GMH again. And it read, a financially weak Guam Memorial Hospital will have to come up with $300,000 by Wednesday or face eviction. This is 1979. That's almost 40 years ago. 1992. This is a Deloitte pricing report that they did when they did the pricing model. And it said the subsidy increased from 5.8 million in fiscal year 1989 to 11.6 million in fiscal year 1991. Although the hospital has survived due to these increased government subsidies, the current operating environment indicates that the subsidy may be required to be increased several $1 million each year in order to guarantee GMH's financial solvency. That's 1999, 1992, that's over 20-some years. And now, I take you to 2003. This article is the article titled, Troubled Guam Hospital to Lay Off 100 Workers, a PDN article. It says, the Guam Memorial Hospital will give 100 employees their pink slips Monday, which will save the financially rocky institution about $1 million per month, said GMH Acting Administrator Bill McMillan. The hospital has begun the process of privatizing its environmental, food, and housekeeping services, allowing private companies to bid for the contracts today. A recently released audit of the hospital shows its operating costs climbed dramatically during the past 5 years from $61 million in FY97 to $80 million in FY 2001. The hospital's revenues have not been able to keep up with expenses. August 2003, another article entitled, Guam Hospital still waiting for payday. The article stated the Department of Administration is racing against the clock to get a payment to Guam Memorial Hospital in time for the hospital to pay its employees Friday. This is August 13, 2003. August 14, 2003, PDN article. It's entitled, Insurance Firms Help Guam Hospital Meet Payroll. Private insurance agencies have come to the rescue of the Guam Memorial Hospital Authority and have offered to give the hospital the majority of their semi-monthly payment a day early, so the hospital will be sure to make payroll. September 2003, the PDN article again, entitled Guam Hospital Pay Delayed as Government Struggles. Guam Memorial Hospital have again been told not to expect their paychecks on time this week because the government of Guam has not paid its medical bills, and the institution may deteriorate further, GMH Administrator Bill McMillan said yesterday. For the next payday after this, the hospital may have to decide between paying its employees or paying vendors for things such as blood transfusions and critical pharmaceutical supplies or pharmaceutical drugs. March 17, 2004, the article states, Guam doctors voice concerns. Local doctors emphasized at a legislative hearing yesterday their displeasure at the state of health care on Guam and once again warned lawmakers that if improvements aren't made, the island could lose doctors. The public hearing was meant to discuss GMH's financial status that spiraled into a broad range of discussions on issues, including automating hospital services, revenue enhancement opportunities, accreditation, challenges facing the hospital, and developing plans to eventually construct a modern hospital to replace the old facility. This is 2004. The physicians' concerns also eventually led to a discussion about nurse retention at the hospital. May 2004, nurse shortage hampers Guam Hospital. The shortage of nurses at Guam Memorial Hospital means sacrifices for its staff. For 32-year-old Robin Granham, it means not making it to her son's parent-teacher conferences. For 36-year-old Ruth Sabangan, it means watching her daughter's kindergarten promotional ceremony on videotape instead of attending the event. For 25-year-old Alicia Lim, it means not being able to tuck her toddler son into bed because she's checking the health status of another mother's baby at the hospital. Lilian Posadas, who is our board chair now, who leads the GMH Nursing Administration board member, said there are about 40 vacant slots out of 150 total nursing positions at the hospital's only civilian hospital. Nurses working at GMH have a dedication beyond measure, Posadas said. June 2004, the article entitled, Struggling Guam Hospital Needs Government Support. This is an editorial by Bill McMillan. GMH, with the support of the Guam Medical Society, will appeal to the 27th Guam Legislature for help in regaining accreditation and maintaining Medicare and Medicaid certification through outsourcing for housekeeping and security services, and a subsidy to meet operating expenses. To meet this shortfall without a subsidy, GMH would have to increase its fees by 67%. No one on our island wants their medical bills or insurance premiums to so drastically increase. GMHA therefore recommends a solution more palatable to family budgets without negative impact to the general fund via nominal increase in property taxes. Memorial Hospital, he should not be out there talking about these problems. It's a sad reflection of poor management. Leon Guerrero told Variety after the afternoon session, if the hospital's dirty, you'd wonder where the management is. Why is he not firing people who are not doing their jobs? He should be training these hospital staff. Vice Speaker Frank Uggan agreed with Leon Guerrero that instead of taking the outsourcing route, the hospital administration should provide its staff adequate tools that would allow them to perform their jobs. January 2005.
Benita,
Please,
are we really
please.
going to go?
No, I'm almost done. Please allow me, because this is I'm getting to a point and it's very critical that I be allowed to finish this. Please, I beg you, Mr. Speaker. Because I've not been allowed in the past, so just let me finish this, because I'm trying to stress the point here, and this is the process that I'm doing. Surgeons boycott over conditions at Guam Hospital. Two surgeons who are protesting the conditions at Guam Memorial Hospital by refusing to respond to some emergency room calls had their operating room privileges temporarily taken away this week, which means they were not allowed to operate on their private patients. Both sides in the issue say their actions are guided by the desire to improve the quality of care at the hospital. August 2005, entitled, Guam Hospital Needs Emergency Cash. The government has called an emergency legislative session today so lawmakers can appropriate $5 million to the cash-strapped Guam Memorial Hospital to avert what local doctors have called a medical disaster. The legislature will be called into session at 2 p.m. so the cash infusion can be made. The amount is half of what hospital officials say they need this fiscal year to pay vendors. Governor Felix Camacho yesterday said, while the emergency appropriation will provide only $5 million, his administration is looking for an additional $5.9 million to give to the hospital. August 2005, the article entitled, Politicians, Let Hospital Management Do Its Job. PDN editorial. It is entirely hypocritical for legislatures to demand accountability for the hospital's management. If they want an answer about who is responsible for the sorry state of the hospital, they can simply look in the mirror. The real managers of the hospital are the island's legislatures and the administration. They decide how much money the hospital is going to get, and they decide what type of management decisions will be supported. September 2005.
Now, Benita, there's 100 months between now
No,
and then.
I'm-
Get
Please.
to CMS this year.
Okay, let me
Get to CMS this year.
get to my,
CMS, this bill is on CMS.
okay. And I'm getting, because it's the
To
funding.
this year.
Let me just. I
This
don't-
year.
Please, Speaker, let me.
This year.
We are working on that. Yes.
No, Benita.
The CMS, you mean the 4.3?
The bill that's before you,
The bill, okay.
that the governor
Speaker?
sent down, was to address the CMS and JCO of 2018.
Yes, and we need money for that. And
Yes,
that's-
then
that's why.
let's get to that.
Okay, so that's why I'm going through
No,
this
you,
process.
no. You can submit that, get to 18. Get to
Please.
the last, no. Thank you. Mr. Burns.
Mr. Speaker, Senators, my name is Edward Byrne, Director of Department of Administration, until February, I was Assistant CFO at GMH. This bill seeks to concentrate the proceeds of a stream of dedicated funding for Guam Memorial Hospital on correcting deficiencies, both operational and facility-based, identified in recent reports issued by the Centers for Medicaid and Medicare Services and the Joint Commission. GMH is a complex organizational structure set up to perform a complex mission. It has a foot in each of the commercial world and the governmental universe. Many of its operating activities are governed by administrative rules and legislation. There are unavoidable costs associated with this. GMH also has to work in the commercial sphere of insurance and self-pay patients. It has to compete for scarce technical and professional resources, and it is at the end of a very long supply chain. Overlying all these factors is its mandate to afford medical treatment to all who request it, whether or not they can pay. GMH performs a public service. That means quite simply that the public must expect to pay for it. It is more equitable and a form of insurance for the public to pay through the means of IMH should not operate efficiently and economically, but it is to say that the cost of providing medical service, a service which matches those standards set forth in the CMS and JC reports, needs a contribution from the public. Without it, GMH, like all businesses trying to operate in a cash shortage situation, will struggle to meet product and service standards. The increase in the cost of medical services is well known to all. Up-to-date medical treatment requires up-to-date equipment. That investment requires cash. That equipment requires space. Providing that space requires cash. The people certainly must feel that the money which the hospital receives with its consent is well spent, that it is used for patient care, that the board and management take good decisions. But withholding a needed cash infusion, just as withholding a needed blood transfusion, will only worsen the patient's condition. Expand GMH financial reporting so that you can be assured of its governance. Expand the board reporting requirement. Inquire more deeply into the performance improvement monitoring system. That is all fair and reasonable. But do not leave GMH starved of cash and resources, unable to plan, which in itself is a requirement of performance improvement, because of uncertainty of funding in future years. Critique the business plan. No plan is faultless, but it is a plan, and that is a start. Most plans require money, and this is no exception. In the end, it is the patients, who might be you and me, who will benefit. Thank you, Senators.
Thank you. Both of you served as controller of the hospital during FY17. The budget, the audit just came out the other day. Have both of you had a chance to review that audit? I'm sure you participated in some of the responses.
But I haven't studied it, Mr. Speaker.
Benita?
I haven't really looked at it in much detail yet because I've been preparing for this hearing. The final just came out, but I have been working with the auditors through the process.
And
So-
in the audit, how much was stated in the audit was transferred from Guam?
I need to go back and look at the notes because I don't have the exact number, but I know that it's the appropriation for 17 was 18 million, which is 3 million for 15 million from the bond proceeds and 3 million from the subsidy. which is from the general fund.
Would it surprise you that for FY17, that the transfer from Guam was $24,679,853?
I would need to, yes, but you have to look at the details of what those are, because you're talking about one item that is on behalf payment, which is about $5 million. That is for the health insurance of the retirees. That the money doesn't even come to GMH. It's paid by Department of Administration, and we record that as an expense on GMH's books. The other one is from the Cancer Trust Fund. It's $395,000, and then the other one is from Healthcare Trust and Development Fund. Speaker, it's on page 44 of the notes to the financial statements. So it does show the GMH Pharmaceutical Fund of 3.8 and the 15 million, which is from the bond fund. So the general, so the subsidy is actually subsidy, because the other portion is the matching for Medicaid, and we don't consider that a subsidy because it's payment for services. It's recognized as operating revenue.
But in the audit, well, how is it reported?
It's in the operating revenue because it's under Medicaid and MIP.
That's why I'm saying, in the audit,
Yes.
how much was reported for 17?
How much was reported for 17 for Medicaid?
No, for transfer from the government of Guam.
The transfer, it's 24. I just listed.
And how much was listed for 16?
16, it's it's 69, but then you go back down and the section 30, that's 49 million. 30 million was to pay the payables, and then the 19 million was to pay off the Bank of Guam loan.
And what I'm saying is, in the audits, I don't care what the newspaper said or what other ads you were trying to read to us on a weekly basis.
Yes,
it was
an audit. Yes, I understand.
The audit that was released just 2 days ago.
And the audit did say that we need subsidy.
From transfer from the government of Guam, separate from your operating revenue, was that there was 69 million, and then for this last fiscal year, it was 25.
You need to look at the details. Like I always hear, the devil is in the details. We don't get all of that to pay for operations, to buy medication, to pay the doctors, to pay the nurses. The 19 of the 49 from Section 30, from the borrowing there, 19 million went to pay off Bank of Guam for a debt.
And what was that? It was an operating expense for the hospital, was it not?
It was recognized as an operating. It's a debt already that needed to be paid off.
I understand, but it was to assist the hospital.
We had borrowed that money, so it's just paying off that loan to Bank of Guam. So you can count it twice, because it was counted as a liability back in when we borrowed the money in 2014. So it's paying off that debt, because the interest was higher than what this
the bond was going to be, so we gave you the authority to borrow the 45.
That's correct.
And so I'm just saying, this legislature has, over the last couple of years, had, at least from the audits, I don't care what the newspapers are saying or what you're saying, from the audits from the auditors, is saying that from the transfer from the government of Guam was last year $24,679,853. And for 16, it was 69.
But Speaker, we need to understand, because this information, it's not, it doesn't explain the operating costs. You're talking about, this is a liability that was, part of this was to pay a liability.
I'm
And-
just
and
asking
so-
how much was transferred from the government
Yeah,
of Guam.
but it's like we're
which was
mixing,
said-
we're mixing apples and oranges, and it's misleading.
You're mixing apples and oranges. I'm reading from the audit.
I understand, I'm reading from the
And I'm
audit
just
too.
saying-
But we need to understand what are the
You're
details.
saying that we underfunded you. I'm just
Yes.
saying the audit is giving a completely different picture.
Go to the audit because it always says that the hospital needs to be funded, it needs to be subsidized.
And
So you can't say that 69
and
million
in
is
your
funding.
and in your
because it's paying off a loan.
citizen-centric report, was it not reported that your occupancy or whatever they call that, the number of patients you've seen has gone down?
Yes, that's true, it has gone down.
The number of clients
But-
or patients you've,
But when you also look at the 2017 audit, you'll see that, we have increased, we have maintained the revenues. It went down slightly in 2017, but because we have raised rates. But when you're saying that the census went down, the employees, we have reduced costs too. But at that time, when the hospital was bursting at its seams, that was not how to run a hospital.
we're just talking about
Yes.
this last 2 years, all
Okay.
right? And I'm trying to ask.
I'm trying to
Has
answer.
it not been true that your census has dropped drastically?
I don't say it has dropped drastically. That's to be expected because of the opening of the other hospital.
And what's the census at the hospital, now that you've brought it up?
What's the census at the other hospital? I don't know what's their census. I don't look at their numbers.
Would it surprise you that they're dealing with as many, and probably at this point, dealing with more 3Ms than you are? And they're dealing with
Yeah,
it
but
with
there-
300 less employees than you are.
They're the last time I had this conversation with an employee from GRMC, their staff to bed ratio was higher than GMH. And then when you say that, the 3Ms.
And they're able to do that
No, but-
with how many less employees than you?
But take a look
With
at
how
their
many less employees than you?
take a look
with
at
how
at that
many-
time they said they had over 700 employees for less number of beds.
Which is how much less than yours?
Ours is 900 because we have full-time equivalents. We have one position that 4 people fills one position because they're part-time. But when you mentioned
but so-
3Ms, they're getting $5,500
I
a day.
understand, but the absolute numbers that they're dealing with, the census, not what their reimbursement rate is.
Okay.
Are they dealing with more patients than you are? Would it surprise you that their census of 3Ms is more than yours?
Well, they get paid more. I'm sure they want to attract more 3Ms.
Not the amount of money, the number of patients, patients.
I understand.
Is it more or less than yours?
Like I mentioned before that I don't look at their census. I just worry about GMH. But that is to be expected. We go back to the audit. What does the audit say? Hospital
And
needs money.
so, as it relates specifically to this bill, how will the .75 be used to address CMS and JCO requirements as per the bill that was sent down by the governor? What exactly? 4 of you have testified, and none of you have told me what the expenses are going to be, what's going to be prioritized under this. Do you have written testimony on it?
I don't have written testimony, but I'm going to try.
Then what are you here for, Benita?
I'm here to present.
No, you were here to read news articles for the last 20 years. The bill before us is the priority as per set.
You didn't allow me to finish my testimony.
Then get to the end of it and tell me what the priority are as per your set there. Not what's on your machine. What have you submitted as testimony for the priority?
I have the file I'm trying to pull out the file of what it's going to address.
And has that been submitted to us?
I'm gonna,
Okay,
you're asking
thank you.
for the list.
Then submit it in writing.
Yeah.
That was what we came here for. The governor's bill states, to correct the deficiencies identified in the Centers for Medicaid and Medicare Services and Joint Commission Report of 2018, once those deficiencies are corrected, the Guam Memorial Hospital may use the funds for operational requirement, capital improvements, or reserves. So what were those that are supposed to be addressed? And if that wasn't in your testimony, you spent all this time going back into archives to 2000 and into the 1900s.
Ay, the speaker, dun na funajan zo na nang kapago sa besangon yung office tige kay gigwin.
Todo pa mo unusa para yung newspaper?
Oh,
Atendi ito,
Ungan, watetindi.
pues the 10% yun eh.
Besangonyo, kwan office ya lista niti CMS citation na manhamid sa ni tautoy facilities na malista.
Pues lista pa ako.
Listadyo pa ako? Okay, for physical environment, we need fire pump assembly, test and drain valves, walkway east and west, egress doors, hazardous area enclosures, cafeteria doors, roof repair, maintenance program software to keep track of the maintenance that's needed, closed circuit TV and access control system.
Pues cuánto todo este?
The total for
No.
¿cuánto?
Each one.
Pero
How
no.
much? Ne?
¿Cuánto cada uno?
Ah,
The fire pump assembly, 100,000. The test and drain valves, 20,000. Walkway east and west, 275,000. Egress doors, 30,000. Hazardous area enclosures, 100,000. Cafeteria doors, 20,000. The roof repair, 5 million. Maintenance program software, 25. Closed circuit TV and access control system, 2 million. The certified professional in health, this is for risk management because this is one of the citation that's needed for training, and the software, it's about 36 million. And then we put in the IT system to integrate better workflow for nurses and doctors, clinical documentation for efficiency.
Now that you've listed that, and it starts off with valves, right? What's at the very top? Read the first two.
Funding needed to address CMS and Joint Commission
No,
citation.
the first two items on that. Don't get cute on me,
Under
Benita.
physical environment,
Yes.
fire pump assembly.
Okay. 100,000, 20,000 for gauges. What happened to the electrical panel that last week we were all saying that was going to blow up and send you into a
Usangangan niyo
emergency?
hofa i citation ni CMS and Joint Commission.
understand.
Taigui electrical panel, gui low importante electrical panel, speaker.
Importante lo
Lo ti humano guati Joint Commission jay CMS at atan ni electrical panel na ipusti mapega no gi citation. Pos una na yo ni lista na fa man mapega gi citation gi po address the CMS and the Joint Commission.
All right.
So,
Benita,
hindi malago
then in writing,
Pos okay.
by noon tomorrow,
By noon
send me the list
esta.
of what it is with the cost of each item.
Okay.
All right? Thank you. Does anybody else have any questions?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. So we'll wait for that list, Benita. But
Yes.
the one we asked is I think the last hearing was the accounts receivable, the gross
Yes.
amount, right? We haven't received that yet, unless you submitted it to the speaker.
Yes, I'd asked my staff that's working on it if she had the updated one, and she said that she's still working on it. Because she was focusing on trying to get the billings and collections in. So,
Will we get that tomorrow too, the updated gross accounts receivable by category?
That's I'll call you tomorrow.
Oh, just
Senator.
provide
Yes.
it to
Yeah,
the chairman.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Because I hadn't received it.
Ito gina na necesita IT system sa Ghost Babay on Mami system.
I wasn't the one that bought all the IT systems
Ni
enough.
ni
I was
Guau
not
Lopez-
the one that bought it.
Senator, Speaker, ni Guau Tigwa Fumane.
Senator Esteves and then Senator.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. If I'd like to add to that request, in the submission of all of the things itemized per the Joint Commission and CMS report, I think for the benefit of both the public and my colleagues, if you can attach that to the specific citation as opposed to just the list. So what I'm looking at is, as you listed, fire pump system, that should be addressed or itemized to a specific citation within the last report or survey, or even a previous one. I think would be allowable.
Yes,
I think
I'll try, because these are from different people that are involved in working on the corrective action plan. I had to just ask him, what are the citations and what is needed to address those citations. So I got them in a room, and this is what they told me will address the citations.
I think then, yeah,
Yes.
the committee's working on the corrective action, then should be familiar which specific citations that they're addressing with this corrective action as it relates to funding. Just a couple of questions. And we've heard about the electrical panel a lot. Has the electrical panel ever been funded, or is the lack of having, or the inability to replace or repair the electrical panel due to procurement?
No, it's a funding issue.
So you've just never had the money
No.
to pay for it?
That's, to my knowledge, there hasn't been funding for that.
Peter John, do you corroborate that?
Yes, sir.
So there's never been a procurement out for the electrical panel?
I'm not aware of it, sir,
Okay.
but I'll check.
How far, I mean, I haven't seen the list yet, and we'll see this tomorrow. How far would $11 million take you if we were to move some money around and find the appropriation within a month?
Within a month, $11 million? That would address our payables, which is at $15 million.
Only the payables? And are those past due? Are they 60 or 120?
$9 million is over 90.
So your first priority would be to address all of the payables, or only the ones that?
Not necessarily. I mean, if we know that money is coming in, maybe we can leverage it and leverage the money that's coming in. Our problem now is, we don't have, our appropriation was only 9.5 for this fiscal year. And, when there was a bill here before the legislature on the sin tax, I did mention that, this would help bridge the gap between now and September, and it's now July, and we're really feeling the pinch on not having that money, and that was one of the reasons why I wanted to go through that, to demonstrate that funding has always been an issue, and the hospital comes to the legislature every couple of years when the liabilities.
I'm sorry,
Yeah.
because not to go against I guess it was very clear made by the chairman that we wanted to focus on this bill. Mr. Burns, if you could please, how much compact discretionary funding was transferred or given to GMH by Adelut
In which year, Senator?
this year, 2017?
20,
How much was received and how much was transferred to the Guam Memorial Hospital?
I actually don't know, because that was before I got to the DOA, but I can certainly tell you.
But you were at GMH. You were the assistant controller at that time. You should have known how much was transferred into you. You can't pretend that you weren't there.
No, I certainly was there, Mr. Speaker. I just do not recall the number, because it doesn't appear in the audits. And it doesn't appear in the government-wide audit that I've just finished.
While you were at the Guam Memorial Hospital, was to your knowledge, was any compact discretionary funded transferred from
Yes, sir.
Adelut to?
Yes.
Okay. I think you now, as Department of Administration Administrator, you should have access to those records. Would you be able to provide that to the committee?
Yes, certainly.
Thank you. I know we don't have rev and tax up here. Do you know, I mean, maybe you're not able to answer this, but has there been any talks on the transferring of the approximately 11 million unbudgeted, non-appropriated funds that we're expecting from the tax amnesty? Is there any expectation to transfer any of that to GMH to address some of their critical shortages?
I'm not aware of any such discussion.
Has there been any movement to try to allocate some of that funding, Ms. Maga'láhen?
I'm not aware of that. I think they're paying tax refunds.
I mean, tax refunds were already budgeted for. So, I mean, those are covered. But I mean, I'm able to estimate about 11.4 million remaining due to the tax amnesty, potentially higher. But I do know that the 9.6 that was not budgeted, non-appropriated, I mean, let's just keep it real simple. It was extra money that wasn't planned for, did not go to the hospital to address some of the critical needs. And I think since we're using news articles, how much was it that was owed to the medical oxygen company in order to remove your credit hold? It was about approximately 700,000?
About 400.
400,000.
It varies because we always have delivery every week a few times.
So for such a critical need, do you believe that the 9.6 million that disappeared, extra money, do you think that should have covered that 700, 600?
Certainly any money would help the hospital. I mean, for us, it doesn't matter whether it comes from sales tax or BPT or whatever the source, we just need subsidy.
And what I'm trying to get to a point here, Benita, is, I've sat down with you guys on a couple of different initiatives, which, are still in the works, but we need you to work with us. I can't do anything with this bill. I can't appropriate you that $11 million if by the time it hits the bank account, it's gone before we're ever able to account it, or because it's never even tagged as supplemental income. But that's extra money floating down there. So, if we're going to be very genuine here in terms of wanting to help GMH, we have to help each other. So if you can please talk to your board, and I'll reach out to your board as well, if they can potentially resolve to earmark and send the letter to Adelup and earmark that money before it disappears. Because we budgeted for tax refunds, we budgeted for operations from this government, we increased the BPT 1% to close out the fiscal year and balance us out, so there shouldn't be any reason why this money disappears. And so, while I'm very empathetic to the cause, it's very hard to look at long-term funding solutions when it seems like only the legislature in action, not through media, not through showmanship, the legislature seems to be the only one taking this matter serious. Because if the administration won't even give you money that they have in their pocket, how could we expect to fund you in the long term if they're not treating it as a priority? And that's where I'm hoping you'll work with us as the go-between and let them know how much that would help you. Because I can't appropriate it, I can't do my job, and I can't push that bill forward if that money doesn't stay in the account long enough for the bill to go through the process. And I'm fairly certain we'd be able to get that bill through real quick if that money was able to stay in the bank even for at least a week.
I think you can still appropriate the money. That's a cash management issue. If that's new money and it's not counted, it's not recognized.
As I'm understanding right now, and maybe the chairman on appropriation can correct me if I'm wrong, we've already addressed the budget. But unless it's tagged as supplemental income, and from what I'm understanding, we can't appropriate it unless it gets tagged by supplemental income. But if it disappears in the void of Department of Administration, and it just gets spent before we can ever identify that money and appropriate it, then we're out of luck. And so I just urge you moving forward. Mr. Speaker, and I just wanted to kind of highlight that point that there are critical needs and there is money available.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The retiring speaker actually touched on a lot of the points that I was going to bring up. I just wanted to ask very specifically, Mr. Byrne, on the tax amnesty money that's come in How much so far has the Department of Administration received on that?
Just over 13 million.
13 million. And in line of questioning from my colleague, that 13 million was not deposited into the Supplemental Appropriations Reserve Fund, is that correct?
That's correct.
So that 13 million has been spent.
Yes.
And who made the decision on where that 13 million was to be spent?
It was spent on items that were already appropriated and reducing payables.
And who made the decision on where it was to be spent?
The administration made that decision.
So the $13 million was prioritized elsewhere. Did the administration direct you to transfer any of that money to GMH to meet these quote-unquote critical needs because quote-unquote people are dying?
No, sir.
So again, Mr. Chairman, in line of question that my colleague initiated that I'm following through with, the administration has money, they're not transferring it. We need to make sure that before we add these additional burdens onto our people, the resources that are presently available are being used for the most immediate crisis. And if this is not being regarded as the most immediate crisis by this administration, then it would be premature for this body to regard it as a crisis that would require additional taxation on our people. For the GMH administration, specific to the bill, it's to correct the deficiencies identified in the Centers for Medicaid and Medicare Services. How would you use this sales tax to address those deficiencies if it wasn't going to be available until October 1st?
We would look at the physical plant requirements that were specifically identified. We would take a look at what other ones that would need to be addressed. That was in the listing that was provided with regards to replacement of equipment, things like that. Then we also wanted to take a look at, as you all know, there is a critical nursing shortage. And one of the challenges that the hospital faces is that our rates are not competitive. And there is a proposal to take a look at restructuring the clinical ladder for nurses so that we can recruit and retain these professionals, and then also for the healthcare, the other ancillary services, physical therapy, laboratory, radiology, those are all waiting in line to be, for their needs to be addressed.
So when specifically, though, were these CMS deficiencies supposed to be corrected?
The CMS deficiencies should be corrected by the 90th day. I believe that would be July. I can confirm that for you, sir.
No, but estimate, I mean, when was it supposed to be corrected by, in order for them not to come back and ding you for it not being addressed?
Some of the issues like the exterior stairwells, because that is a longer-term project that would need to be completed, we've submitted requests for waivers. So there are some projects in that physical plant that look to an extension of time for them to be completed because of procurement and getting the right provider to do the work.
So are all of those items that could be extended or waived until a later time? What I'm getting at, Mr. Camacho, is if the money isn't going to be there tomorrow and the situation is urgent, then obviously the sales tax wouldn't address that. If the situation didn't require an immediate funding source because it could be waived until a later time, then obviously it's not critical to the CMS issues that are currently being addressed by the hospital. So if the money's urgent, then this sales tax wouldn't solve it. And if the situation isn't urgent, then it has nothing to do with whether or not CMS is going to allow you guys to continue with the CMS reimbursements. So I'm trying to understand here, how does this in any way solve the problems that you're saying it's going to solve when it wouldn't in either scenario?
Part of the requirements for CMS and Joint Commission is that there is a safe environment for not only the patients but staff, visitors. And so if there are, in their survey, they find issues like that exterior stairwell, um, that could pose a risk, they will call it out. And that is why, and for that one, it was actually determined to be in
But
immediate jeopardy.
Didn't you just testify that that was something that you can get a waiver for because it'll be more of a long-term project?
We abated the situation, so that means the hospital took other alternate measures to ensure the safety of not only the patients in those areas, but staff as well.
So is that urgent and needs to be funded now, or is that something that you don't need to get addressed immediately for the CMS issues to be abated for the near
We can
term?
only go by what CMS was saying, and that was an immediate jeopardy that we were fortunate enough to abate, but that we still needed to complete the project within a certain time. We submitted our request for a waiver to CMS. They're reviewing it. They make the determination on whether or not the time frame is acceptable to them for that extension.
Mr. Chairman, could I expand on the request from GMH? Because, I mean, it's one thing to give us a list of everything that needs to get funded, but it's something else entirely if that list is something that could be abated until a later time, or it's something that needs to be immediately funded. And if that list could also include what the immediate items are versus those that could be abated until a later time. And if they are immediate items, how is this sales tax, if it were even still an option to consider, how would that fund it? Because it's not available until October 1st. Mr. Byrne, how much more money are we expecting in the tax amnesty?
You'd have to ask Mr. Camacho, Reverend Taxat, but I think he recently said that the total was likely to be somewhere between 30 and 32 million.
So assuming the lower end estimate and assuming that you've already brought in 13 of that, that means we're expecting $17 million more in the amnesty.
If I remembered his number correctly, yes.
Has the administration sent you any kind of indication that they want that $17 million to go to these CMS issues up at the hospital?
No.
Mr. Chairman, it's just the governor calls us into special sessions, sends us down a bill to prioritize money for GMH that's not going to be there till October 1st, and yet he has not at all transferred or indicated an intent to transfer any money to the hospital. Mr. Camacho, do you have in writing or in an email or somewhere a letter to the governor asking him to transfer money to the hospital? Can you?
I don't have a letter to that. There has been some discussion just with regards to, the needs that the hospital has.
I'm just, and putting something in writing is so important because it indicates a seriousness, and I just find it to be very disappointing that we're willing to come here and do all of these things, and you're not even writing to the governor saying, Governor, I'm officially requesting that you transfer funds. I mean, even knowing that this money is going to be here in the amnesty, we should be writing to the governor asking him to initiate it as a priority. We're calling press conferences, parading out vendors, saying people are going to die, and yet nothing to get the money that's already there. It's just, it just looks like one big show to push a sales tax. And that's why we're all up here in a very difficult place to take any of this seriously at this point.
If
Thank
I
you,
may,
Mr. Chairman.
Senator, my understanding is that the monies that the revenues supposed to be generated from those particular things had been already appropriated for. So any collections from the tax amnesty program would have been supposedly allocated for that, but that was my understanding.
Your understanding is incorrect.
Thank you.
Though that's additional money that we weren't anticipating in the current budget. And so if it's as important as he says it is by calling us into special session, then he could very easily say the first $11 million that's collected goes to you immediately before October the 1st to take care of all of these issues, or whatever number that you come up with as the amounts. But if I were the governor, I'd have a hard time too, because Isn't it true that your electrical panel that was going to blow up last week has been looked at, and all it needs is some servicing and not $10 million or $6 million worth of repair?
The assessment is still ongoing, so we've not received a final report back from GPA.
You're going to stand on that and that's a position that you're going to take? Because we've received word that the panel has been looked at.
Yes,
And,
it has been.
and that it's not going to blow up in the next
Yes.
week, and there's
Yes.
not going to be a parade of evacuating patients dying in the hallways, going down the hall, and getting out
No.
doors.
They did come and they did look at the panel, so yes, you're correct.
And what was their preliminary statement to you?
Their initial assessment at this point is that the electrical panel looks like it is safe and that it may not collapse, as you've indicated.
And taking that, you've also included it in as not being one of the first things that needs to be addressed as the most critical issue. And even then, your own testimony from your CFO contradicts the governor's statement. The most important thing that the governor wants in this bill is to first address CMS and JACO, not to address your $15 million in accounts payable. It's only after, please read the bill carefully, after you've addressed CMS and JACO, then you can start talking about using money for operations.
Yes, sir.
Senator Lee.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just want to go off of what some of my colleagues had already mentioned. They asked a number of the questions that I was intending to ask, but I wanted to also find out from you, Mr. Camacho, is the GMH board aware that money is available or may be available? Did you communicate that to them?
I believe they are aware, ma'am.
So there's an email from you to the GMH board members identifying that certain amounts of money are available that has already been used for other things or may become available.
I've not sent an email to them regarding that particular one.
Okay, so how can we be assured that they are aware? You've made phone calls, or how are you communicating with your board?
Through discussion, conversation calls.
So you're calling them and informing them of this?
I think it was in, I believe so, but I can.
I'm asking because even in the questions that have been raised just in this public hearing alone, with regard to funding issues, with regard to money being available, you know, there has been statements put out by the hospital and by the administration that only the legislature can fix these problems at GMH. And the more questions we ask, the more we're kind of finding out that that's not the truth. The more questions we ask about the electrical panel that you have said is a major crisis, that you called the media down to show them, and you know, you're placing the public at risk because they're afraid that maybe patients might have to be taken out of their rooms and that GMH might not be a safe place. That's a public health hazard. And every time we go through this song and dance, we're eroding the public's trust. And I'm extremely concerned about those things, especially when it comes to public health. So I would very much appreciate if you could get back to the speaker about the costs of some of these things, tie them to the specific deficiencies in the CMS report, and just give us an idea also about the timeline for the revenues, if that's part of your planning. Because as one of the senators had pointed out previously, GMH probably wouldn't start realizing the revenues from the sales tax until October or even November. So, right, so I just want to get a sense of what your plan is for addressing these CMS deficiencies immediately if the money for those things won't be available until later down the line. So if you could include that in your submission to the committee, I would appreciate it. Sidos Masi.
What was the reaction from the board at your board meeting last week?
So, I'm sorry, sir.
What was the board's reaction at the board meeting last week?
We have a meeting tomorrow, sir.
I thought when we had our several oversights, I thought the board meeting was supposed to be the 29th of June. I thought it was last Friday.
We had to reschedule the meeting, sir.
So the board has not convened to discuss any of this?
Which,
To discuss the CMS report?
yes, they have. They've
When?
met at the Board Quality and Safety Subcommittee.
The subcommittee has met,
Yes.
but the full board has not
No.
met.
No.
And the Facilities Committee, has the Facilities Committee met to address the list that you're supposedly submitting to us tomorrow?
Our chairperson was off island, ma'am. Sir.
Go ahead.
I just want to make a comment that, the public is aware that CMS has cited the hospital. We're all concerned about losing your status in October 1. And so I was really hoping that today's hearing, that since the bill talks about the CMS and addressing the CMS, that we were going to see a very organized report of the progress you have made since the report came out. I saw your responses. We got those after we subpoenaed. And so we see your responses and the plan of how you were going to resolve these, but I guess I was expecting to see a progress report on what's resolved, what's not resolved, why are they not resolved, what's the impediment to resolving these things, and maybe some of those are money, but I'm hoping that you've resolved some of those things. But it sounds like, I'm kind of shocked that we're not able to get answers to what you still need after you've been working on resolving what they've given you notice on. You understand what I'm saying?
Yes, ma'am. And if I can just answer that part of your
Sure.
question. CMS, the folks who were reviewing the plan of correction, had been out in survey, and we got notice from them that they are currently in the process of reviewing the plan of correction that we had submitted.
Oh, no, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about your side. You've made your plan of how
Yes.
you're going to address these things, and they've
Yes.
got to be done quickly.
Yes.
Yet, I guess I was hoping you were going to tell us, we've addressed half of the citations, we're done with those, we've got, 10 more to go or 100 more to go, whatever, and that we are confident we are going to resolve all of these except for 10. There's 10 left that we cannot resolve without additional money, and these are the list. Instead, I feel like we're getting this runaround again that we can't even get a list until we keep asking for information, and we're just not getting this information promptly. So I guess, I don't know. I just would like for you at GMH to assure the public that you are sincerely trying to not lose this for us, and that you're trying to, get it resolved. So what is the progress of all of that? I would think if I'm gonna come in here to talk about that, that's what I'm gonna talk about, my progress, how optimistic I am that I'm going to complete it, or are we not?
Part of the process, ma'am, is that CMS would need to review the plan of correction that we submitted.
So you're not going to act on it until you get word back from
No,
them?
we've been,
I would hope that most of those things are resolved already. That since they mentioned them to you, you fix it.
we've
that-
worked on all of the citations, and we're waiting for them to say, yes, you're on the right track, or no, you need to readjust, but we haven't heard back from them.
It's very strange that there was a meeting with the governor, according to the newspapers, to resolve the electrical panel issue, but not to resolve whatever is remaining on your CMS list. That, I don't know, I'm just speaking because I would like to walk out and, assure the public that GMH is on it. They know what they're doing, they're going to resolve these issues, that they are not trying to lose this for us, and that they are really working hard. But it feels so vague, the answers, I guess, that I feel like I'm
We
getting.
developed the plan of correction. We have started.
Yes, but implementing your plan. I know, we've seen your plan, but who's implementing it? How far have you gotten? And what's left? I'm hoping there's just a few things left, like the $50 million IT, okay, that's left. But what about all the other things that you can actually finish? I mean, why not meet with the governor about those things, right? If you've resolved everything or you just need something, I don't know. It's very strange to me. You're not here with a list that you need from us. You're just saying, we just need this vague amount of money. That I don't know how many times we have told you that's not going to work. It just does not work. And there's so many reasons for it, because past history, credibility, you name it. But if you everybody's asked you in all the different hearings for lists of things that you need, but I also want to see the list. I want the public to know what this team in front of us today has done, what they're done with as far as meeting the CMS. I mean, I know you have to deal with all kinds of other things too, so I'm hoping we're doing CMS and we're able to keep moving.
Yes, ma'am.
But I don't know. I guess I'm leaving today with not much facts of, I don't feel confident. You haven't reported any real progress, but I'm just going to give you the benefit of the doubt that there is some, but you're not reporting that. That's the problem. We're not seeing it. So we can't. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Senator Rodriguez, you had another question?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a follow-up question. Benita, the pharmaceutical fund is what is appropriated for GMH from Medicaid. And because of the drop in census in
Yes.
Medicaid, there's going to be a lapse funding. Do you know what that amount is? Because I've been trying to coordinate that with public health, and what we're going to need to do is to appropriate that for other purposes, right? Because you don't need it for the Medicaid patient. So do you know what that amount is? Have you guys talked to public health about it?
So there's still, I guess, processing some 2017. You're talking about 2017, right?
Mm-hmm.
The last time I looked at it and I calculated how much we got from just the match part, I think we used about $6-7 million of the match, based on what was paid out in 2017.
Because what we're being asked to do is to reappropriate, to reprogram that for other areas of expenditures from Medicaid, aside from GMH. But if we really do need funding for GMH, I would prefer to reprogram that for use again of GMH for things that are critical, like
So
to
that
address.
would be like a direct subsidy.
That's right.
Right,
Well, so
yes.
I'm just talking about what is needed now, because
Yes.
you're up against the time here, whether it be the
Yes.
CMS deficiencies or whether it be the 14 million you owe to vendors, right? To kind of get,
Yes.
to get back and to receive some more. So that's one way. If we're talking about how we're going to find resources, one of the immediate options we have now is this. So I'm going to ask you to please look at that. We'll work with you and see how we can get that done legislatively. The other opportunity here is, that's why I'm asking you about the accounts receivable, your
Yes.
gross accounts receivable. Just what you have, your latest update is from April 2018. And you have a receivable from at least the private insurance, about 33 million. And then you have the allowance, I'm assuming that's what you deduct from them, which
Yes.
is 25 million?
It's,
Which is 25 million from the 33, which is a balance of 7 million. So that 7 million, is that something that's collectible, that you're able to collect?
it would be, that's a total insurance, but it's all timing. Some are tied to denial, review, rebilling, so it, it's a timing. And for 2017, we collected almost $10 million more from the insurance than we did the previous year. So we have been pushing our collections from the insurance companies. There is a regular meeting from the providers to go through all the denials and just go through each account.
So is there a
a
way
reconciliation
to
process.
put more effort into that?
We have been, trust me, every payday, we call them. And
To help you, right?
yes.
To kind of get your immediate cash that you
Yeah,
need.
thank you for that.
And so that's one way that
Yes.
I think we need to double our efforts on.
Yeah,
And sure, you have been.
Yeah, we have been.
But the other is the pharmaceutical fund. If you
Yes.
can take a look at that,
Yeah.
and that's going to require legislative action, and I'm
Yes.
willing to do that if
Okay.
need be. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Benito, you still on the fiscal team?
We in the general meeting, yes, we attend that, but, they have their own working sessions or meetings that we're not a part of when they
But you-
discuss details of,
Mr. Burns, have you been added to the fiscal team?
Yes, Senator.
And just trying to follow up on Senator Nicholas's point, this sales tax, if it was to remain, if there for some reason a miracle and there was an override failure next week, we wouldn't be receiving any money, or at least not know how much we receive until sometime after November 1st. The collections would start on October the 1st, but we wouldn't know how much that was. I mean, and by that time we would already lose the CMS certification. And so I think Senator Nicholas's point should be very well taken. We have 60 more days with 13 more million coming in between now and the August the 6th. If you can get them to give you a list, which somehow changes, but whatever, get a list of whatever that is, and if all the environmental things come up to 6 million, that they have 6 million that he prioritizes as he has asked us to make the sales tax that's going to be realized in November.
Yes, Senator.
To be paid, to be set aside for this very purpose.
If I could just comment on that. I've been listening to the discussion going back and forward. The list that you asked Benita for was a list of capital expenditure items. And much of that cash would actually be dispersed, presumably, after October, because some of these projects take a while to install. So I can imagine that being dispersed from the sales tax if the miracle that you referred to happened.
But I think for CMS's purposes, if they know that we as a government have prioritized the environmental issues that you've listed, and that there is cash in a lockbox that's not going to be spent for vendor payables for any other thing, but just to address this. And that the RFPs are going out to do whatever needs to be done to buy the $20,000 gauge, the 100,000, whatever. And if there's an emergency, that the emergency is declared, and there have been all kinds of strange procurement things for those small items that can be done immediately to address them. And if we can be called into special session, I'm still surprised that you haven't called your board in for an emergency session. But I'll let Senator Frank Ogden.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And, you know, Mr. Speaker, some of the comments and the questions are certainly very direct in regards to the need for funding. I remember, Mr. Camacho, many years back, when in fact GMH had initially acquired accreditation. And you and I worked very closely at that time, if you recall. And all this time since then, the legislature has stepped forward to be able to provide the necessary resources. But this time around, it's a different environment, because we are told one thing and then we find out something different. Give you a good example. At the last discussion, whether it was an oversight hearing or a piece of legislation to provide additional funding for GMH, I asked you a direct question. And the direct question was, if money was not an issue, what are the 3 things that you would address immediately? First one was the electrical panel. Now this evening I'm finding out that an inspection has been conducted, and based on preliminary assessments, it would require just cleaning the system, preventive maintenance. So that $6 million request, which was something that you had highlighted, was an essential component of maintaining the safety and the health of our people at GMH, inclusive of all of your employees. Now that is an issue that is no longer at the forefront. The second component you mentioned was you need to upgrade your computer system, and it's going to cost about $15 million. And that, in and of itself, we recognize has been repeated time and time again tonight. But then I listened intently to some of the discussions, and tax amnesty, publicly reported, $9.6 million additional collections. Based on discussions here, this is how much has gone to GMH. In light of the Joint Commission providing their report in February and saying, I believe it was February, and saying these issues have to be addressed for GMH to retain accreditation. And then the CMS report comes out in June. You provided your response by June 15. Even after that, after this government collects $9.6 million above the initial revenue collections based on what was passed in 34-87, that is how much has yet to even go to GMH. And I hate to even assert that there's not an emergency at GMH, because we know that GMH needs external funding support. But all these information, and to me, some of them are non-factual, like the $6 million panel. That is no longer an immediate emergency other than addressing the cleaning of that and the preventive maintenance. So that's really where my quandary is, because we worked initially, and you remember what position I held at that time in the legislature, where the government of Guam and GMH was successful in acquiring accreditation initially. And all this time, this legislature has stepped up to provide as much support as it can within means. But then the sales tax would have been a $30 million gift without this body even understanding and knowing how those proceeds are going to be expended. And how are they going to take care of operations? How are they going to take care of retaining accreditation? How are they going to take care of addressing the CMS and the Joint Commission concerns? I want to just ask Peter John, you know, usually when you have an evaluation and assessment, you come up with a matrix of these are the items of concern, and then you set specific timelines as to when you're able to accomplish those. And my question is, I know you mentioned a few timelines, but my question is, what percent, knowing full well that you're presenting it to the members of this legislature and to the people of Guam, what percentage of issues have you addressed with the Joint Commission concerns and findings? That's one. The second part of this singular question would be, what percentage of the CMS findings have you completed to date that does not require external additional funding support? So can you provide me those percentages?
Not right now, but I'll get that information.
Mr. Speaker, and Mr. Camacho, that's where my concern comes in. That is really where my concern comes in, because you have had the Joint Commission findings and concerns since February, and we have yet to even understand what percentage you've accomplished. And then now the CMS came out with their findings in June. You provided a response in June 15, and you're telling me that to date you haven't even worked out a matrix so that the people of Guam and the members of this body can understand where you are at? Because if you've been able to address, hypothetically, 50% of those, that does not require external funding support, that deals directly with management, working directly with the supervisors, as well as all of the professionals at GMH, then at least we would have a sense of understanding that, yes, these issues are being aggressively addressed. But right now, you're asking for a blank check of $30 million from the people of Guam, but we don't even know where you are in addressing those real findings, because one could literally lead to you, to GMH, losing the Joint Commission accreditation, and the second component could literally lead to the CMS declination of Medicare and Medicaid funding for the people of Guam through GMH. That's my question. I mean, it was initially asked earlier, but I would think that you would know as a fact. Well, let me extend this even more. I would think that you would be reporting to your board on a regular basis as to exactly what you've been able to accomplish and ensure that these things are being addressed. In addition to that, because the governor has asked us to consider a piece of legislation, I would think that you would have reported to the governor of Guam as to where you are with all of these findings and concerns that are real concerns, because coming to this body and once again asking for a blank check from the people of Guam, especially, this is the taxpayers' money. You need to do your homework. You need to ensure that you provide us with specific information so that we look at it and we address it in terms of direct funding support. Because based on everything that has been provided, all the information and all the concerns that have been relayed to this body, any funding, additional funding that is provided to GMH may be specific in nature. So that if it's $15 million needed to upgrade the computerized system and the record system for GMH, that it would be lockboxed. Mm-hmm. You've come to that point. And guess what, Peter John? That that does not provide management with the flexibility to be able to manage your funding and your resources that's given to you by this body. That's where the challenge comes in. So, Mr. Speaker, I know that it was asked a little earlier, and I'm asking you to provide not only a list of the findings, but give us a timeline matrix of exactly when you have accomplished some of these, if you have even addressed it, and when you anticipate to accomplish those, so that at least we can understand, and the people of Guam can understand, based on the Joint Commission findings and recommendations, this is the timeline matrix. Everything should be addressed, and these are the specific items that need external funding support. And this is what their anticipated cost would be. And then go to the CMS report, very similar matrix, and provide it to this body. And I would recommend you provide the same matrix with all that information to your board members and also to the Governor of Guam, because they continue to ask and advocate for resources, and you're not hearing members of this body say, no, we're not going to give you any money. We're saying, show us and let us understand exactly what you are doing to address some of these concerns and what are the tremendous urgent matters or urgency that we have to be able to provide support for. Don't just ask the people of Guam for a blank check of $30 million and say, oh, by the way, CMS and Joint Commission issues have to be addressed first, because the good senator from Talafofo and Deridu was absolutely correct. The proposal is to allocate the proceeds of the sales tax, which would have gone into effect October 1st. Collections, probably based on the rules and regs, will not be until the conclusion of that month. So between today, July 5th, and October 1st, and possibly the end of October, what are we doing? Are we going to wait for the money to come in? If, in fact, that was still in place? So I'm just saying, you owe the people of Guam that information, and you owe this body that information in terms of exactly where you are with some of those findings. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Senator Morrison.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do want to thank Ms. Maga'láhen. I understand the chairman wanted to move things along, but I do appreciate some of the historical information you shared. I didn't know some of how far back this goes, but I appreciate that. I do thank Mr. Camacho. I think one thing that I didn't forget is under your helm, you were able to obtain working of a great team and legislatures to get the hospital fully accredited. And I think anybody that certainly knows how to do that is you. Never sat in that seat to sit there and unleash the banner that the hospital was fully accredited or gets its full accreditation. So I do hope that given the challenges before us today, your experience in being there, that we're able to avert or address these challenges and whatever help we can offer. Has GMH reached out to our congressional delegate with our share of the $144 million and growing, the impacts from COFA citizens? I mean, I'm not sure if there's been any discussion of what could be done there. Certainly, I know in the Compact Impact Report, I believe in large, more than 50% of that is healthcare costs associated at the GMH. Has there been any help or reaching out to the congressional delegate's office?
Yes, I have met with the Congresswoman's staff and also a phone call. It's specifically on assisting us with the Medicare reimbursement, where we're still waiting for 2014 and 2015. We had received notice from Noridian, the CMS contractor, that had validated our adjustment request for 14 and 15, which is a net 4.3 million. And we reach out to the Congresswoman if she could assist and contacting CMS to help us on that. We've also reached out to her to, communicate with the General Accounting Office regarding our request for 2009 to 2012 to review the the authority for HHS that they could waive the late submission for 2009 through 12, which will generate about 12 million. So if that one is waived, the late submission is waived, and CMS allows the contractor to review, that's over $12 million that the hospital can receive. CMS cites that the hospital was late in submitting back then. They don't also follow their statutory deadline, where the 2014 and 2015 should have been disbursed since December of 2017. We still have not received that. We also submitted 2016 and 2017 adjustment requests, and we are expecting a decision this month from the contractor. And our request is for $8 million. If that one goes through and the contractor validates it statutorily, if we get the notice in July, CMS is supposed to make a decision by December, but as how we've been reimbursed from CMS, it takes 3 to 4 years by the time we see the money. 2007 and 8, we got it in 2015, and 2013, we got it in 2016.
Thank you, Ms. Maga'láhen, and thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Camacho, I shook your hand in 2010 and congratulated you with that full accreditation and the team. I do hope, with your experience, that with all these challenges before us, there'll be a different story down the road. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We'll adjourn this hearing.
Good night. Thank you.